Larysa Mudrak, independent media expert, so Maryna is first to speak. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's very pleasant to be here at the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center and present you an analytical report done jointly by the NGO for Democracy Through Law and the Center for Civil Society Studies, with the involvement of experts in different spheres of functioning of civil society and cooperation between civil society and the state. I have to tell you that this report, as a serious analytical document, is being introduced to replace the institute cancelled by the President of Ukraine of annual appendix to the State of the Nation address that was recently made public by the President of Ukraine. I have to tell you that not only in Ukraine, but everywhere in the world, this civil society is developing very dynamically, and not a single country in the world today can just look at their citizens, at their community that forms the state only as the third sector. New, modern, innovative trends of interaction between the state and the society are linked to the fact that the state and society are partners now, that they work together on fulfilling the general state tasks and societal tasks, and they are jointly responsible. I have to tell you that modern trends of development and development of civil society were analyzed by the experts in the civil society development as far back as several years ago, and we were deeply convinced that the authorities do need a social dialogue, and that the authorities without society is nothing. They cannot realize in any way, in a societally correct way, not a single task. And we proceeded from the fact that state and society should be partners and really interact and cooperate at every level, and only then it is possible for them to function in a democratic way, to a functioning of a legal state where the major value is a person's dignity and honor. So while thinking about these issues, we initiated a strategy of helping to develop civil society together with experts who've been working in different spheres of the development of civil society, and we took as our yardstick the international experience of cooperation of development civil society, used both in the old and new democracy states, where in the conditions of transition from post-totalitarian state to democratic and legal state, the state should stimulate, first of all at the institutional level, the development of a responsible and active society. It was rather hard on the stage of 2012, for instance, to launch this strategy. We have overcome a huge official resistance about the adoption of the strategy, about the essence of this strategy. At the same time, the strategy was adopted according to the decree of the president, and as an instrument of realization of the state support for the development of civil society, there was a coordination council created linked to the president, and it became a honest grounds for holding a dialogue where in many cases there were complicated and sharp dialogue between the civil society and the authorities, and the coordination council on the eve of the revolution of dignity have undertaken a lot of serious steps that have improved the indexes of democracy in Ukraine, and we are talking about the adoption of the law on people of civil assemblies that corresponds to the international standards. We are talking about the law on charity and charity organizations, also the preparation of draft laws linked to new approaches to the volunteer work, practically at the stage before the revolution of dignity. We were able to develop an institutional basis that, under the circumstances of Russian aggression against Ukraine and on the terrain of Ukraine engulfed by the military conflict, gave a possibility to civil society and public organization to realize their abilities or compensate for the non-fulfillment of the state of their functions. We have just heard the briefing of charity organizations that really took part in the work of the Coordination Council. We were lobbying the corresponding law in the parliament. We managed to do a lot, but practically all the problems that charity workers have just mentioned in relation to the parliament, the president, and the cabinet of ministers, they are urgent, they are topical, and they are covered in this report that is about the problems of development of the civil society. I think that apart from the draft laws and laws that were passed and that I have just enumerated, we were able to realize a number of other initiatives, first of all linked to electronic government, the plan of preparation of Ukraine to electronic government was recognized in Brazil at an international forum, one of the 10 best programs for the partnership. It is open government because they are good quality initiatives which were introduced and realized by the efforts of members of the Coordination Council and correspondingly of the experts that work with the Coordination Council. Why have we done and prepared this report? Because the situation now is rather complicated. We think that if we talk about the objective trends of the development of civil society and interaction between civil society and the state, it is evident now that the civil society is ahead of the authorities in practically all the spheres linked to the functioning of the state and the country as a whole. We're talking about best proposals and suggestions from the public about the reforming of the country, about civil and public initiatives that practically cover the issues of rebuff to the foreign aggression. We're talking about the volunteer activity, and this is the society while helping IDPs, non-protected people today, under the situation that is here now. We're talking about the fact that practically in all the spheres the society is ahead of the authorities. Regrettably, while this trend is here, when the power, the authorities after the revolution of dignity should consolidate the society, and this public energy that was spent to break down the non-democratic system, they should have channeled the public initiative into peaceful channels and should legitimize and get the public support and simultaneously improve the quality of reforms. The authorities now have practically distanced themselves from the civil society, both in the issues of reforming and helping the civil society where it works even without the state. I'll tell you that I regret very much that in April the President of Ukraine has made changes into the strategy of helping to develop the strategy of development of the Ukraine, of the civil society, where he cancelled the annual planning of the development of the civil society, where he cancelled the monitoring on the part of the head of state, where the appendix as a form of the work is cancelled. The appendix to the annual State of the Nation message of the President to the Parliament and the society. And in fact, there's a strategy which has no mechanism of realization, because the Coordination Council that was into those questions, into those issues, that was the engine of issues connected to the help to develop the civil society, was cancelled as well. So under the situation that we now have, we understand very clearly that the trends of cooperation between the state and the society at all levels, with local self-government, with territorial communities at the level of the central authorities, you cannot lose this cooperation. So I think that by giving an assessment to today's state of relations on the organizational work and the issues of development of the civil society, we do start an active work that we've been carrying out for the last years, in spite of whether we were supported by the parliament or the authority. We were working insistently and incessantly. For instance, we supported the law on charity and charity organizations. This is a clear example of that when a state segment of lobbyism and the Institute of Civil Society are united, you can overcome the resistance of officials and non-understanding of MPs, and we can do a useful work. Now, to sum up, I would like to say that as every conscientious citizen of Ukraine, we are aimed at constructive approach. As never before, the state does need support now, even with the situation when there is no political will or enough political will at central level or desire to specifically work on this or that issue. We will actively help the authorities. The report is analytical. It contains not only it does not only state what there is, it does not only sum up, it also gives a forecast about the trends and directions that should be worked upon further, so that a responsible and active civil society is formed in Ukraine that will be a partner of the authorities at all levels and in all spheres for the common weal. We see these directions as such. First of all, the entire civilized world, if we talk about the European integration, the entire civilized world lives when the state is losing its paternalistic functions, and the provision of quality social services according to the highest social standard established by the law of Ukraine, they are provided by the public sector. And actually the civil and public sector has become in all the countries a component of economic system of this or that country. We have to aim at this. And during some time we were able, when we worked on the law on public associations, which also corresponds to all European standards, we were able to, in parallel with this, to make amendments to the budget code of Ukraine, where they now provide for the financing by the state of social services on a competition basis. This was a serious breakthrough, and we have to work now, especially under the circumstances, and we have a huge deficit in our budget, and we have problems with forming the local budgets. Another direction which is no less important when we talk about the serious reforming of authorities in the state, this is the direction that is linked to the participation democracy, and Vitaliy Kulik will speak on this in detail when he will speak about this. And the issue of decentralization of authority is not just the issue of relations between this national power and local self-government. First of all, these are relations between territorial communities and local authorities, and then this state-level authority. Before people go into decentralization of power, people should get the tools with the help of which they may influence the solution of local and national issues. Now, there's no law of local referendum in Ukraine. The outdated clauses on different forms of participation of citizens, like initiatives and consultations, and we are now launching the process of decentralization. So now we don't have the merger of territorial communities, but the merger of the bodies of self-government. And the process of decentralization is not as simple as the authorities now show it. No less important is the direction that is linked to the development of the so-called green democracy in Ukraine. The events that are now taking place next to Vasilkiv show that in Ukraine the green democracy system is absent at all. The Ministry of Ecology, and I'm finishing, does not practically perform the functions of control and cannot perform them, especially when the quota and political principle of the appointment here, they cannot do this. The relations in this sphere should be built on a totally different basis. It is very important, of course, when we talk about corruption, fighting corruption, de-oligarchization of Ukraine. New problems are very important. They were developed even during some former periods, even in Soviet times. Then they have lost a bit. But the question of labor democracy is now very important. We're talking about a worker, a member of the association, of the incorporated enterprise has the right to influence the policy of the enterprise, and the owners should carry out the socially balanced policy of entrepreneurship so that the workers have social guarantees. And so the problem and the issue of social partnership is another very important issue. We've started the work on the strategy of socially responsible partnership, and to round off, I have to say that we are just starting our work with this report. We've done this work instead of the institutions of power, and to understand where we are, where we have something negative and positive, where we have to work further, and in this way to overcome the disadvantages that are now evident in relations between the powers and society.
Vitaliy, you're welcome. Thank you. I will try to stick within the time frame. We have about 10 minutes, 3 minutes for your intervention. When we are talking about revolution of dignity, we need to remember that that was not the attempt to change the names in the power. The Maidan, the first requirement of Maidan was to change the system of power. It was not about changing the name of the president, but changing the institutions and relations between the citizens, citizen and business, between business and the state and the citizen. There had to be the systemic revolution that would affect the life of a common person. And when now the slogan, change the system, is not popular among politicians because they want to restore the system, modernize, reform, but Maidan and the revolution were demanding to change it, replace it by a different institution, and that is why we're talking about the relations between the citizens and the state. During Maidan, they were saying that such an institution as live democracy is to be applied. The citizen is to participate in the decision making and execution of decisions. We were talking about having a new public administering that should be a maximum transparent system. We need to introduce IT technologies into the process of management and administration. We need to increase the volume of the freedoms and rights of people, because the latest events demonstrate that there is the narrowing down of the volume or scope of freedoms and the rights of people. Simple examples: initiative on cancelling the immunity on it's not just about the traffic, the right of presumption of innocence, to cancel the also some politicians suggest to cancel the abortions. Will the next step be to prohibit women to vote? The next one is the criminal responsibility for so-called paid for meetings, and if that norm was in Yanukovych times, and it would have been applied against the Maidan participants. Basically, when the ruling coalition is trying to avoid expanding the scope of rights and freedoms. When we're talking about peaceful meetings, I would like to remind you of the discussion that was held in the 2011-2012 around the law on peaceful meetings, and we were for passing that law, which would regulate the right of the citizens to have the protest actions and the right freedom of peaceful meetings. There's no law, and the ruling coalition is avoiding the discussion around that. They're blocking passing that law, and they're also blocking the law on local referendum. When we are saying that there should be public governance and there should be several criteria, the simplicity of the procedure should be easy for the citizen, responsible resources, accountability and reporting. The example, introducing the law and introducing amendments to some regulations of Ukraine as to defining the final beneficial beneficiaries. But in fact, that means that every organization should submit the form which would specify the founders of the organization. The deadline was 25th of May. In the result, we had heart attacks, corruption, and absolutely non-transparency. The state legislature was not ready for this procedure. The members of parliament had to introduce amendments and extend the time frame 4 months. Why had they created such problems? If you want to read some emotional article on that, I suggest you to read an article of Nastya Zakamorna on Politcom website that describes what was happening with people on the 25th of May. They extended the time frame, but I expect that the last week again we will see the same. The state registrator is not ready to implement the law. The NGOs should not be submitting these forms because they do not get the profits. This should that should be only about the subjects of business activity. Also, there are certain institutions of influencing the citizens of the local authorities' decision-making. These are public hearings or bodies of self-organization of the society. They in the law and self-governance, but in fact there are no mechanism of implementing realization of these rights, and initiators of the reform of local self-governance at the level of the Ministry of the Ideologies and the advisors of some public experts who are lobbying and who are participate in blocking the reform of local self-governance. They avoid the discussion of the democracy at the local level. They're not interested in the member of territorial community having an influence on local bureaucrat elected by this citizen. That is why we don't have the new version of the law on local referendum. We don't have any legislative regulation of local initiatives, public expert analysis, public hearings, and so on, because that's not beneficial for local civil servants. It's better to take the scissors and copy and paste some of the powers, but it's not important for local. The local civil servant doesn't want the citizen to control his activities. That is true about the openness of the budgetary process. Till now, we don't have a website where you could see where the state money go, to say nothing about local level. In the end, I would like to say that the picture in the report is quite pessimistic, but there's some optimistic section which shows some horizons where the democracy of participation should move. For the first time, we see that we can finance civil society sector. Maidan shows that the citizens are ready to invest their money into public initiatives, public campaigns, and the civil society organization. There's the cooperation between business and civil society. It has different forms and formats. We see that the role of information technologies grow, and community in the internet and Facebook and contact, they become a powerful political force. We see that the mobs are now one of the factors of forming not just street policy, but they affect the reality. We see that actually the society is getting rid of the patronage of the state, and the state is opposing the society to mature. When we are talking about the strategy of the state, we believe that the state has to help development of civil society. They have to increase the volumes of freedoms and rights so that the society develops and creates new forms of interaction. Now we see that the state has to leave the space, leave the dialogue with civil society, imitating the forms. That is why we have the Reform Council, where they talk about everything. That is why we initiate the amendments to the strategy. They are afraid of that. They are afraid of the influence of the civil society. And the task of the experts is to unite efforts, not to allow the restoration. Thank you. Larysa, 3 minutes, if you may. Thank you. The experts always have something to say, because that's an analytical report. Why I joined it as independent media expert, because for me it is very important that everything that is about real information policy in the state is developed. That is why for a year I've been working as a volunteer in many components in the working group on creating the public broadcasting, as a volunteer on development of my favorite public radio. I believe that's unprecedented what's happening with the public radio, the potential and development. And I am volunteer in the hospital, because the story of the wounded is another component which the state doesn't need. What is in this report on information policy, and what is important for me? At least to stop this gap between the real history of creating the information society in the state, because the public sector does have it and they're using it correctly, and what in the fact is called is named in slogans that we have e-governance information society. There's a huge gap between the understanding and notion, and it is has deepened. Unfortunately for me, it's the issue of principle. That's why I'm doing what I can do on information policy now. Even in difficult years of 2012, 2013, we managed at the state level, via the Coordination Council on Development of Civil Society, we were managing to approve some very important issues for development of information community and information state. That is expert work on new convergence media. We live in internet. We need to become an internet state, like many thousands of states in the world. Estonia is officially called the electronic country. France has passed the legislation that all the citizens in the state have the legislative right for internet. Do you understand what it is? We should have rights in the internet because we live there. And till 2013, we managed to work with people who understood all these things in the administration of the president, in the National Council, in the Council of Europe, because in 2013, 2014, I was the representative of Ukraine in the Council of Europe, and I brought all the developments to the country, and we managed to get them all approved. The issue of development and protection of children in a new information space was developed by 80%. Now it's put aside or cancelled because we have now different problems somehow, and we probably do not need to defend children during the information war. All the countries are doing it but Ukraine. Because why I'm here? Because work with the youth audience now, when the society are entering the information life, the development of civilization. It is very important because teenagers are people who are forming their future, and it is important to work with them. Why I am here, why I was writing part of this report, because media literacy is not just the component of the Ministry of the Ministry of Education, because that is the mass education from 3 years to 103 years. We need to teach all people the rules of safety and security in the internet. There are no laws and rules there. We need to organize that, and now that's done by the civil society, but not by the state. I'm sorry. Why I'm here? Because in fact, there are many topics. For 7 years, the state, the media experts, are writing new pro-European law on TV and radio, because TV and radio, they exist having merged with internet, and this law is to be called on audio-visual services, on multimedia, because we do have it, and they've been writing it for 8 years. Have you heard that it's being discussed? Unfortunately not. Luckily, there are some regulations, and I can thank the committee of the Verkhovna Rada that they do certain good things on transparency of the ownership of media, and the main thing is public broadcasting. That's another reason why I'm here, because public broadcasting, if we do not introduce it now, if we say that we cannot, or we again, the political fighting is in the way, this will be the final phase. This will be understanding that there will be no public broadcasting Very difficult processes are going on. The team of Duraba Lasanya is doing a lot, but for that to become a real public broadcaster, and we would like all the TV communities and public radio to join it, and that allows us to give it an incentive. And I would like to believe that introduction of the public broadcasting was transferred to 2017, but I hope that this process will start working, because these are our opportunities, capacities, information capacity, because otherwise we'll be a black spot on the information map of the world. That's why I'm here. I believe that this report will be useful for those who believe that the intellect is the most important in the state. It should be developed and supported, but what's developed, what has been done, will continue at each one at our own level. One question from me: what next? The first step was the report. What are next steps? Very briefly, we are starting in all the spheres the detailed partnership work with other institutions of civil society. If the authorities would want to join us, we are ready to cooperate, but we have the position, and we understand clearly that the position is in democratization but not imitation, in clear forms of work but not replacement of real work by imitation processes. The next event that will be initiated is the roundtable in the nearest future, within a month, with the participation of experts. We'll get together and we'll discuss this report and the forms and the works of future cooperation of civil society in accordance with what we propose. Maybe we'll hear other proposals on cooperation. We'll be working not just on central level. There is an interest, and it is important to work with regions so that local people are involved into active work, so that they have an opportunity to influence authorities, to influence the quality of decisions which are made, and together be responsible. This will be just the proof that our state will not be dissolved. Unfortunately, the authorities do not understand. If they do not work in different directions, in different spheres, together with the society, with different segments of the society, they have no future. Unfortunately, we see other trends today, and I hope that the reason will win. Before answering the questions, I would like to say that we have some partners here, and we will have to develop the civil society. We will unite our efforts, and we will have a very good partnership. But I would like to invite Grigory Malumush for several minutes, if you have desire, the chairman of the civil society movement, to express his attitude to the positions which are in the report. Thank you. I would like to say that we united the
public movement for the future of Ukraine in numbers 2,650,000 people, among them 350,000 military, police, and so on. And those are medics and ecologists and people who were on the front line. We are working on the strategy of defense and foreign policy, and we have provided this. We have given this model to the G7. I've given it to Ms. Merkel personally, and our colleagues said rightly that those best practices and best ideas are not being realized, and we think that we are already doing this work ourselves, including the fight with the corruption, and no one will allow the powers, the authorities, to go against people, and we will make the authorities to cooperate with us, which will lead to the new victories and new flourish in our state. Thank you very, very much. We have to finish our briefing, and I invite you to that part of the premises. And also, Maryna, I invite you to the stage. Yes, to the rostrum. I am so thrilled, I am so glad that finally in our society, between our broad circles of public, we see that reason will at last prevail over emotions. Ukraine now has to have elite programs, not the scenarios of replacing one regime with another, which regrettably happened on Maidan. Civil society is a new degree of consciousness and responsibility. We have to be responsible for the future of our children. We are forming our new Ukraine. God help you. Good luck. Glory to Ukraine. Dear colleagues, let's go to that